Hello and welcome to this week's episode of QTV. Wow, have we got a fantastic program coming up for you tonight.
We'll be chatting to Russell Nankervis, a young gay man struggling with coming out in the country town of Bathurst.
We'll bring you the colour and excitement of Midsummer Pride March.
Kaylene Langford talks about the challenges of coming out at work.
And our Moments in Time series remembers Annabelle's 1970s bar in the city that offered a space for Q+ people.
My name's Russell Nankervis and I'm currently 24. I grew up in Bathurst and I'm openly gay. I was constantly bullied because I was so out there, but it just made me stronger and a little bit, just motivated me more to fight more for equality. My parents even sent me to counselling so I could be more comfortable to come out of the closet. Being gay in rural areas like Bathurst and even further out west can be quite isolating and quite lonely. I definitely remember just coming out of the closet and thinking that no one else was gay, but as soon as I started coming out, I started to find more and more people. I didn't have my first boyfriend until I was in year 12, and he was like 9 years older than me, so I didn't even get to be with him at school, while all my straight friends constantly got together and broke up throughout high school, so they got to experience the whole side of exploring their sexuality a lot easier than I can. Like, I know I had 2 MySpaces. One was a gay one where I could just explore and be whatever I wanted to be and chat to whoever I want and talk anything really. And the other one was my public profile, which I wasn't so comfortable with talking about sexuality on that one. So yeah, it's definitely grown and evolved since then. It's much more connected and much more open. But yeah, definitely, I think the internet's definitely helped rural gay people. I know that I think Orange had a youth group that was starting or that was going. Bathurst had its own gay group, but they were for like older gays. So things have probably definitely changed and improved. But yeah, I can't exactly say what the scene is now. Things are so much better in the cities. And I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're definitely easier. Like -18 in Melbourne, they do their best to reach out to rural areas, but there's only so much you can do in 2010 and stuff like that. So yeah, there are struggles for being a rural gay. I remember back in 2009, I had a woman say to me, she saw how fabulous I was and how camp I was, and she came up to me and she's like, just leave. So moving wasn't a decision for me that was about trying to protect myself and be safe. It was more, there was no job opportunities. But I know many gays who move away from family because they're horrible. You've got 2 sides of the coin where sometimes they just don't care, but then they also don't realise that they're being homophobic, so they'll be like, oh, don't be such a girl, or don't be so gay, or whatever. So when really they're fine with gay people, they just don't see that as being homophobic.
Thinking of, say, a rural or regional area like Bathurst,
Yep.
Is there much support in those places for marriage equality, do you think?
I think for those who know gay people, or know people who know gay people, or are related to gay people, I think there is a level of support, and there's definitely a generational thing where like younger people are more likely to be supportive of it while older people aren't. So I know personally, like, my grandparents were thinking about voting no, but because I wrote a letter to them asking them to think of me first, that they voted yes. I feel like my own parents would be voting no, like my dad and my stepmother. I know my mother and my auntie have voted yes, and they live in rural areas, even more than Bathurst. And I've seen reports like the 730 report where they were like, some people just don't care, so they're just going to vote yes, or they just don't want to know about it. Definitely I know a lot of younger people, and I know all the people that I know that love and support me in Bathurst are voting yes, so I'd like to think that there are a majority of people in Bathurst that will be voting yes and will be quite happy and supportive of it all. So marriage equality for me is quite important because there have been, the LGBTIQ elders have fought for the freedoms that I have today. And this is just my way of contributing to that history to fight for equality in the society. It's a way of paying it forward to future gay generations, LGBTIQ people in the future, just because, yeah, I want to contribute to society. Marriage equality won't be the answer to homophobia, it won't destroy it completely, but I honestly think that it'll definitely help to normalise and to bring acceptance towards LGBTIQ people and their community and their relationships. So it's because currently, like, we know with the weight behind marriage, people understand and respect and adore that. Even though the divorce rates are increasing and less people are getting married, we know that it still has a lot of respect within our community. So opening that up to LGBTIQ people is just a good thing. It's called an argument. It's not one-sided. We're not going to sit down and be quiet because our mere existence and the fact that we want to get married makes you uncomfortable. You need to realise that. And in the end, we just want to get married. That's it.
Where do you see the future going now? I mean, there's a very strong possibility now that we've got a yes vote going to get through. Mm-hmm. Where do you see things going for the LGBTIQ community from here?
I honestly see positive things coming forward. I think there potentially may be a slight strong backlash from the no camp, but to be honest, I think it'll be very short-lived. We'll have huge celebrations. We'll feel equal and loved for the first time in decades, if ever. And, you know, we'll just move on. It'll just be another thing to talk up to our history where we can march with pride and realise that we have fought and struggled for this equality. So I think it's honestly going to be a good thing. And, yeah, we're only going to go from strength to strength from now on.
Coming up now, we have all the colour and glamour of the Midsummer Pride March.
Coming up next is Kaylene Langford, who spoke on Joy 94.9's Saturday Magazine. Then we'll remember the past role played by Annabelle's Bar.
A quarter of people who are involved in new startups actually feel like they need to hide their true identity, their sexuality identity.
Really?
A quarter.
Wow.
This is in 2019. A quarter of the population. And even more interesting than that, a recent survey conducted by a group called LaunchFix said that nearly a third of all people have experienced some form of homophobia in the startup community. And most people in the startup community acknowledge that more support is required for people in the LGBTI population. So in your personal experience, do those stats feel true to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky now because I've built my own business, so I get to surround myself with people who are supportive of myself and how I choose to live my life. But definitely when I came out, over 8 years ago now, I was asked to leave my job. Pretty horrible experience, and I definitely went through the anxiety of talking about a partner in a workplace and having work events and being nervous about using the pronoun she when I was talking about my partner. And how watching people's reactions of are they going to judge me differently? And even as a public speaker now, and I use my own personal story in my public speaking, that I definitely catch myself when I say partner and then follow it up with she, of watching the audience or not wanting to watch the audience in case there is a homophobic reaction.
I would have thought the majority of people in the startup community are younger. 28% strikes me as really high. I'm not saying it's not correct, but it strikes me as really high.
Definitely a shock, but I was in an Uber the other day and he was saying how he worked in government as well. He was contracting to government, and I just so can I? And he was talking about how he was in a same-sex relationship, and and I said, can I ask you a personal question? Are you out at work? And he just choked up and couldn't answer the question, and and he was, probably my age, in his 30s. And so it's a real thing. People just don't feel safe. We want to talk about what it means to be out and at work, or I guess bringing your whole self to work and feeling safe to do that. Creating inclusive workplaces, so that it shouldn't be a concern for people to be able to talk about, the gender or their sexual preference. Goal is to put role models of people who are openly out and proud and supported in front of other people, so that people can go, right, that's something I can aspire to and it's not that scary. And then also give support to everyone and anyone who wants to make their workplaces more inclusive.
And you're specifically targeting startups and small businesses, early entrants?
Yeah, but we definitely, anyone in the business space who wants to learn how to make their workplace more inclusive. And you could just be somebody who's, in a business and know somebody in your workplace who hasn't, is maybe needing support to come out.
Can you give us an example of one or two examples of what a business can do to make their workplace more inclusive and safe for queer people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for my personal experience, it's exactly that, of not assuming the pronoun of a partner. Yep. So using the open language and allowing that person to decide what their personal pronoun is, and then also the pronoun of their partner.
It's also about being grammatically incorrect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have to talk about them and they when that's not typically grammatically correct, but it is actually giving the license and permission to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think allowing, not assuming anything is really important. Labels on toilets and, invites for partners to come to work events, and having that as a safe space.
For those in the know, there were always places in central Melbourne where camp people could gather. As early as the 40s and 50s, there were pubs and cafes where, as long as people were discreet, their presence would be tolerated. What shaped this, amongst other things, was the fact that Melbourne had, until 1966, a law that said that pubs had to close by 6 p.m. and restaurants had to stop serving alcohol at 8. This really shaped the kind of social lives that people could have. But after 1966, when the law was changed, everything else began to change as well, in particular for camp social life. By the mid-1970s, there were a number of different gay venues emerging in the central city. Not gay bars in the modern sense as we understand it, but places that were more open about who they were appealing to and who they would welcome. There was Isabella's, there was the University Club, there was the Anglers Club. But the most important of them all, perhaps, was Annabelle's, tucked down a small laneway in central Melbourne. It was famous for being the first place in Melbourne that welcomed gay people 7 days a week. The building itself has a great history. It was originally the German club, but was seized during World War I and handed over to the Army and Navy Club instead. It's hard to imagine what any of those people must have made of the place that it became in the 1970s, when Glenn Waller, whose family had a history in managing bars, took it over. He was a man who knew what he was doing, and Annabelle's success reflected this. It's a very grand building. Inside there's a sweeping staircase that takes people to the upper floor, where there was the bar and the restaurant. Annabelle's was famous for serving good food, which was more notable than it might seem. In those days, under the new 10 o'clock licensing laws, food had to be served, but most licensees restricted their offerings to tired party pies and sus-looking frankfurters. When Annabelle's offered good food, it was doing something very new. Annabelle's was rather community-minded. It organised picnics, and on Christmas Day it organised an orphans' dinner for those who had nowhere else to go. It also had a social club called Blades, which organised dances in different suburbs around Melbourne. Annabelle's represented something very new. It was quite open according to what was possible at the time, but it also represented a kind of community spirits that most of the newly emerging gay bars simply didn't have.
Wasn't it great to take a look back at Annabelle's bar, a real forerunner for today's modern queer bars, and such a great place for meeting and community hubs.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
A lovely look back in time there. But that's it for us for this week. That's all for QTV. We'll be back next week, same time, for another great episode. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.